Today is December 13th, Wednesday. Only a few more shopping days between now and Christmas. Thanks to all of you for joining us here on Atlanta News First for this edition of Political Update, broadcasting live from our Midtown Atlanta studios from our First Alert Desk. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by producer Maria Moreau, and these are the top political stories we're following for you at this hour. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is pushing for a citizens-only voting constitutional amendment. Governor Brian Kemp has approved new legislative voting maps. Former President Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in Georgia and one other battleground state, according to a new CNN poll. Happening at this hour, the U.S. House is expected to begin voting on whether or not to formalize a formal or an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. Rudy Giuliani is on trial in Washington, D.C. for defamation regarding two former Georgia election workers. And finally, you have the chance to own what is being touted as the most significant artifact in American political history. We'll get to that story in one moment. But right now, one of our top stories that's gaining a lot of attention on our website, Atlanta News First, and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is proposing a constitutional amendment that would prohibit non-U.S. citizens from voting in statewide elections. Now, Raffensperger is widely considered or rumored to be a potential candidate for Georgia's wide-open gubernatorial race in 2026. He first gained national attention in the aftermath of the 2020 presidential election when then-President Donald Trump and the White House placed a phone call to him and asked him to find enough votes to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election, an election that was narrowly won by Joe Biden, therefore putting Joe Biden into the White House as the 46th president of the United States. Now, Georgia Secretary of State is pointing to record turnouts in the 2018 midterms, as well as the 2020 general election and the 2022 midterms of just last year, as proof that Georgia is a national leader in terms of ease of voting and election security. And he is urging the General Assembly this January, in this upcoming session, to adopt a constitutional amendment prohibiting non-U.S. citizens from voting in Georgia elections. Speaking of Georgia elections and the state of government, Governor Brian Kemp signed into law last Friday a series of new voting maps that would change the state legislative and congressional districts for thousands of Metro Atlanta and Georgia voters. Now, the maps are the result of a special legislative session that just completed last week, a special session that was called by Governor Kemp after U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Jones ruled the old maps to be in violation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The newly drawn maps were adopted by the General Assembly special session along party lines that concluded just last week, and our own Doug Reardon has a closer look at what these new voting maps are all about.
Sam Park is the Democratic whip in the Georgia House. He's the first Asian American man and the first openly gay man to serve in the chamber, and is well liked. He won his last election in District 107 with almost 70% of the vote. But if maps proposed by Republican lawmakers are approved, Park will have to run against his colleague, Greg Kennard, something he doesn't want to do.
It is unfortunate to find the Republican majority continuing to target members who have, for the first time, broken historic barriers to ensure that their communities have a seat at the table.
It's not just an issue facing Democrats in 2024. Although the new maps pit 3 sets of Democratic House incumbents against each other, it also pairs Republicans Beth Kemp and David Knight in the same district, and they're not fans of the change either.
He has been a wonderful mentor since I have been in the House of Representatives, so certainly it's not a contentious situation in that respect. But it is challenging because now we're in a situation where we will have to qualify and compete against each other.
While Park plans to vote against the maps, Kemp says she'll still vote yes, despite the predicament it puts her in.
To me, it's not the emotion. I can't vote no simply because it didn't benefit me, because the reality is, in my personal opinion, I really feel that the maps do meet the criteria that Judge Jones set forth.
Park disagrees and hopes Judge Jones, who has the final say here, will opt to appoint a nonpartisan expert to draw the final voting lines.
Judge Jones can and should find all 3 of these maps, the Republican map for Congress, State Senate, and State House, to be unlawful.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
That was our own Doug Reardon looking at the geographical boundaries of Georgia's newly drawn legislative and congressional maps. Now, the judge who threw out the old maps, that being Judge Jones, Stephen Jones, is set to hold a hearing on December 20th to determine if the most recently drawn maps that Governor Brian Kemp signed into law last week are indeed constitutional and meet the Voting Rights Act of 1965 standards. If he rules that they do not, he may appoint a special master to draw the new district boundaries in time for the 2024 elections. Speaking of the 2024 election, a new CNN poll released this week from CNN, as I said, shows former President Donald Trump leading current president, the man who succeeded him in the White House in the Oval Office, Joe Biden, by a series of 6 points here in Georgia and by as much as 10 points in Michigan. Now, Georgia and Michigan are 2 crucially important battleground states in the road to the White House in 2024. Now, the majority of, also something very interesting about the poll, the share of voters who say they would not support either Trump or Biden is at least as wide as the margins between the 2 candidates themselves, possibly reflecting an overall state of dissatisfaction with what is shaping up to be a rematch in 2024 between Democratic president to vote and possibly formalize an impeachment inquiry into the president. Now, the impeachment inquiry surrounds a congressional investigation into whether or not the president had any financial dealings with the businesses in which his son, Hunter Biden, was involved. Now, earlier today, Hunter Biden made a public statement on the steps outside the U.S. Capitol, where he denounced the inquiry without taking any questions from the media. Now, here's a package from the Associated Press talking more about what exactly an impeachment inquiry would or would not do.
Hunter Biden arrived on Capitol Hill Wednesday after being subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee, which is leading an impeachment inquiry into his father.
I'm here today to make sure that the House Committee's illegitimate investigations of my family do not proceed on distortions, manipulated evidence, and lies.
Hunter Biden insisted he will only testify in a public hearing, not behind closed doors as the committee requested.
I'm here. I'm ready.
Republicans pushed back.
We expect to depose the president's son, and then we will be more than happy to have a public hearing with him.
The rare comments come days after Hunter Biden was indicted on tax evasion charges. He is also facing gun charges. House Republicans have been investigating whether President Biden improperly benefited from foreign business dealings allegedly involving Hunter and other family members. Hunter Biden, who's recovering from addiction, admitted he made mistakes in his life, but forcefully denied any wrongdoing by his father, President Biden.
My father was not financially involved in my business, not as a practicing lawyer, not as a board member of Burisma.
Republicans in the House plan to vote to formalize the impeachment inquiry of President Biden as early as today.
We think the House of Representatives will go on record with a power that solely resides in the House.
Many Republicans hope that making the investigation more official will help them enforce subpoenas. The months-long investigation has not found direct evidence of wrongdoing by the president. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
That was a report from CBS News. My mistake. I mistakenly identified that as an Associated Press package, but that did come from our national affiliate, CBS News. Now, if the impeachment inquiry is indeed formalized today, the House Judiciary, Ways and Means, and Oversight Committees will continue their investigation, and Georgia Congressional Representatives Lucy McBath, Hank Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Drew Ferguson all sit on some of those crucial committees that will play a role into whether or not the House continues its formal impeachment inquiry regarding the President of the United States. Also happening right now at this hour in Washington, D.C., a 2020 Georgia election worker has been testifying that she feared for her life in the aftermath of the 2020 election here in Georgia, and specifically Metro Atlanta, Fulton County. Her testimony has been one of the focal points in a defamation lawsuit against former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who is also a lawyer for former President Donald Trump. Wandrea Shea Moss took the witness stand Tuesday in the second day of the defamation trial that will determine how much money Giuliani will have to pay both Moss and her mother, for also another Fulton County election worker, Ruby Freeman, for spreading a conspiracy theory that the two Fulton County election workers were attempting to change the vote tabulations in the 2020 election. Now, Giuliani is not contesting the defamation charges, but the trial, which I said is happening now in Washington, D.C., will determine the level of damages he will have to pay the mother and daughter duo. And we've been talking, and so much of our attention is focused on what happened here in Metro Atlanta and Fulton County in 2020. Finally, now it's being touted as the most historically significant artifact in American political history. Donald Trump is selling pieces of the business suit he wore on August 24th, 2023, when he was arrested and booked into the Fulton County Jail. Now, this is the same suit Trump was wearing for his historic mugshot, the only mugshot ever taken of a former president of the United States. Trump made the announcement yesterday, Tuesday, on his Truth Social platform. The website selling pieces of the suit, collecttrumpcards.com, even has a chance to win dinner with the former president himself at his famous Mar-a-Lago, Florida home. Those are all the top political headlines we're following at this hour. Thanks to all of you for watching and following us here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com, on all of our streaming platforms, including YouTube. Stay with us for all the latest political news and headlines as Georgia continues to dominate the nation's political landscape.